Aella, the village herbalist, was known for her quiet demeanor and gentle spirit. Her days were spent tending to the sick and injured, her nights spent poring over ancient tomes, seeking knowledge of the natural world. Kael, the village blacksmith, was a man of few words, but his strength and loyalty were legendary. He was Aella's childhood friend, and their bond was as deep as the roots of the ancient oak trees that shaded their village. In the heart of the nearby forest, a darkness had begun to creep. The once vibrant trees withered, the animals grew restless, and strange, unsettling noises could be heard at night. The villagers feared the worst, but Aella and Kael were determined to uncover the source of the darkness. Their investigation led them to the ruins of an ancient temple, a place shrouded in mystery and legend. Deep within the temple, they discovered a shadowy figure, a creature of pure malice. This was the Shadow Lord, a being of immense power who sought to plunge the world into eternal darkness. His goal was simple: to corrupt the hearts of men and women, to sow discord and chaos, and to ultimately rule over a world shrouded in eternal night. Aella and Kael ventured deeper into the temple, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the eerie creaking of ancient wood. As they approached the heart of the temple, a massive stone door loomed before them. It was adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of destruction and despair. With a deep breath, Aella pushed the door open, revealing a chamber filled with an otherworldly glow. At the center of the chamber stood a towering, shadowy figure. Its eyes burned with an intense hatred, its form shifting and twisting like a nightmare made flesh. This was the Shadow Lord. "You have come," the Shadow Lord's voice echoed through the chamber, a chilling whisper that seemed to come from all around. "I've been waiting for you." Aella and Kael stood their ground, their fear tempered by a fierce determination. They knew that they must confront this evil, no matter the cost. "You will not succeed," Aella declared, her voice trembling slightly. "We will stop you." The Shadow Lord laughed, a sound that was more chilling than any they had ever heard. "You are but mortals," he sneered. "You cannot stand against the darkness." With a wave of his hand, the Shadow Lord unleashed a torrent of darkness that engulfed the chamber. Aella and Kael were forced to shield themselves, their eyes stinging from the corrosive power of the darkness. Just as it seemed that they were about to be overwhelmed, a burst of light erupted from Aella's hands. The darkness retreated, revealing a shimmering barrier that protected them from the Shadow Lord's attack. "What is this?" the Shadow Lord hissed, his voice filled with surprise. "It is the light of hope," Aella replied, her voice firm, "and it will defeat you." The Shadow Lord roared in anger, his form growing larger and more menacing. He lunged at Aella, his claws outstretched, but she dodged his attack and struck him with a powerful blow. The Shadow Lord stumbled back, his grip weakening. Aella and Kael seized the opportunity and unleashed a combined attack, their swords flashing in the dim light. With a final, desperate scream, the Shadow Lord dissolved into a cloud of darkness, leaving behind a chilling silence. Aella and Kael collapsed to the ground, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. They had temporarily defeated the Shadow Lord, but they knew that their battle was far from over. The darkness was not gone, and it would return stronger than ever. As they made their way out of the temple, the first rays of dawn began to break through the clouds. Aella and Kael turned to face the rising sun, their hearts filled with a mixture of relief and dread. They had saved their village, but at what cost? And what would the future hold for them? As they walked through the village, the villagers gathered around them, their faces filled with gratitude and awe. Aella and Kael knew that they had become heroes, but they also knew that their journey was far from over. The darkness was still out there, waiting for its chance to return, and they would be ready to face it, no matter what the cost. Perhaps the oracle could help. The old woman's eyes sparkled like distant stars, Aella whispered to Kael, her voice barely carrying over the crackling fire. They sat in the cramped, dimly lit tavern, surrounded by the low murmur of the villagers' conversations and the occasional clank of a tankard against the wooden counter. Kael took a long pull from his mug, the foam clinging to his mustache as he listened intently. "The oracle's words are not to be taken lightly," he replied, his voice gruff but gentle. "If she speaks of your heritage, it's because she sees something in you that others do not." Aella fidgeted with the hem of her cloak, the fabric frayed from years of wear. "But what could it mean? That I'm somehow connected to the Titans?" The room grew quieter as the mention of the ancient giants hung in the air. The villagers exchanged wary glances, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. Kael leaned in closer, his gaze intense. "You've seen the ruins, haven't you? The ones they say are left from their reign." Her eyes widened at the memory of the towering stone structures that had stood sentinel over the nearby forest for as long as she could remember. "Only from a distance," she admitted. "The elders say it's dangerous to go there." "Dangerous, yes," Kael agreed, his eyes flickering with a hint of excitement. "But sometimes, fate demands that we face our fears and explore the unknown." The tavern door swung open, a gust of cold wind carrying with it the scent of rain and the distant sound of thunder. The chatter of the villagers abruptly ceased as a figure, cloaked in shadow, stepped inside. The newcomer surveyed the room, his eyes lingering on Aella and Kael for a brief moment before he approached the bar, his intentions as obscured as his face beneath the hood. The oracle's cryptic message had left Aella with more questions than answers. Who was she really? And what did it mean to be connected to beings of such power and legend? Her heart raced as she thought of the tales she had heard as a child, of the Titans' fiery wrath and the world-shaking battles that had sent them into exile. The room grew colder, and the air thickened with an unspoken tension that seemed to coil around the figure like a serpent. Aella felt the weight of 1,000 untold secrets pressing down on her as she looked up to meet the stranger's gaze. The eyes that stared back at her were a piercing blue, filled with a knowing that seemed to cut through the very fabric of her soul. "You've been summoned," the stranger said, his voice like the rustle of ancient parchment. "The time has come for you to embrace your destiny." With those words, the world as Aella knew it began to unravel, and she found herself standing at the precipice of a journey that would take her far beyond the comfort of her village and into the heart of a legend she never knew was her own. The stranger, who introduced himself as Lyris, pulled back his hood to reveal a face that was as ageless as it was hauntingly beautiful. He spoke of the Shadow Lord, whose whispers had been growing stronger, corrupting the very essence of the world. "Only you, Aella, with your Titan's blood, can prevent his rise to power," he said. Kael's hand tightened around his mug, his knuckles turning white. "We must be cautious," he warned, his eyes narrowing. "The path ahead is fraught with danger, and the Shadow Lord has eyes and ears everywhere." Aella took a deep breath, the gravity of the situation settling heavily upon her shoulders. She knew that to turn away now would be to doom the world she loved. With a newfound resolve, she nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly. Their journey would lead them through the very ruins she had once feared, now a beacon of hope in the face of encroaching darkness. They would face mythical beasts and ancient guardians that had slumbered for millennia, waiting for the one who could wield the power of the Titans. The rain had turned to a steady drizzle by the time they reached the edge of the forest, the towering stones of the ruins looming like ghosts in the misty twilight. Aella felt a thrill of excitement and terror mingle in her chest as they stepped beneath the ancient archway, leaving the familiar world behind. Their first trial came swiftly. A monstrous creature with scales like obsidian and eyes like burning embers blocked their path. It roared a challenge that seemed to shake the very earth beneath their feet. Kael stepped forward, his sword gleaming in the dim light. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. But as the creature lunged, Aella felt a surge of power within her, a force that seemed to resonate with the very air around her. The ground trembled as she raised her arms, and the creature stumbled, then froze as if held by an invisible hand. With a fierce cry, she unleashed a burst of energy that sent it reeling back, its scales cracking and smoking. The creature let out a final, defeated roar before it dissolved into ash, leaving Aella and Kael to stare at each other in amazement. "I didn't know," she began, but Kael only offered a knowing smile. "The Titan's power is in your blood," he said. "Now it's time to learn how to wield it." And so, with each step they took deeper into the ruins, Aella discovered more about her heritage and the ancient magic that lay dormant within her. The trials grew more difficult, the enemies more formidable, but she faced them all with a courage that grew stronger with every victory. Through whispers of the wind and echoes of the past, the Titans themselves seemed to guide her, their presence a comfort and a warning of the battles yet to come. Aella knew that the ultimate test lay ahead, when she would face the Shadow Lord and decide the fate of the world. But for now, she focused on the moment, her hand tight on the hilt of the sword that had once belonged to a Titan, her eyes set on the path that wound through the ruins like a serpent's tail. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker, but she and Kael moved forward, driven by the bond between them, a bond that was as unbreakable as the very stones they trod upon. The air grew thick with anticipation, the whispers of the Titans urging her onward. Aella felt a thrill of excitement and fear as she stepped into the heart of the ruins, the chamber where the ancient beings had once held court. The fate of the world rested on her shoulders, but she was not alone. Together, she and Kael would uncover the secrets of her lineage, and perhaps, if the prophecy held true, she would find the power to save them all from the shadow that threatened to engulf them. The chamber was vast, the ceiling lost in the darkness above, supported by massive pillars carved with images of battles long past. A pedestal stood at the center, upon which rested an orb that pulsed with a soft, ethereal light. The air was heavy with the scent of ancient incense and the electric charge of power not seen. As Aella approached, the light grew brighter, reaching out to her like a beacon. Her heart raced as she placed her hand upon the orb, feeling the power surge through her veins, awakening something primal and fierce within her soul. A voice, ancient and powerful, resonated through the chamber, echoing the whisper she had heard since her encounter with the oracle. It spoke of a time when the Titans had walked the earth, their power unrivaled, their rule just. But it also spoke of their fall, of the treachery that had bound them, and the prophecy that foretold their return through one of their own bloodline. Her eyes grew wide with understanding as she looked to Kael. "The Shadow Lord," she murmured. "He seeks to use my power to free the Titans, to bring them back and plunge the world into chaos once more." Kael nodded gravely. "And it is our duty to prevent that from happening," he said, his hand resting reassuringly on the hilt of his sword. The chamber began to shake, the very stones groaning with the effort to contain the power that now surged through Aella. Her eyes glowed with an inner light as she drew the Titan's sword from its sheath, the blade singing with the promise of battle. Together, they ventured deeper into the ruins, the whispers of the Titans guiding them through the labyrinth of corridors and hidden chambers. They encountered more mythical creatures, each more terrifying than the last, but Aella's newfound power allowed her to stand firm, her courage unwavering. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, until they reached the very heart of the ruins. A cavernous chamber with a gaping maw that led to the underworld itself. The Shadow Lord awaited them, his form a twisted amalgamation of darkness and malice. "You dare to stand against me?" he hissed, his voice like the grating of stone. "Your kind have always been so weak, so easily manipulated." Aella's grip tightened on the sword, her determination unyielding. "I am not weak," she said, her voice ringing with the echoes of the Titans. "I am their legacy, and I will not let you destroy the world they once sought to protect." The Shadow Lord laughed, a sound that was more chilling than any she had ever heard. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered. "You are but a mortal playing with the power of gods." But Aella was not alone. The spirits of the Titans, drawn by her courage and her blood, began to coalesce around her, their forms faint but unmistakable. The chamber grew brighter as their power melded with hers, creating a wall of light that pushed back the darkness. The battle was fierce, the clash of steel and shadow resounding through the ancient halls. The air was alive with the crackle of magic and the roar of the Titan's spirits. Aella and Kael fought side by side, their every move a dance of death and defiance. As the Shadow Lord's power began to wane, Aella saw her opening. With a cry that was half battle cry, half prayer, she leaped into the fray, her sword slicing through the darkness with a final, decisive blow. The Shadow Lord's form dissipated into smoke with a scream, leaving only the echo of his malevolence in the now still air. The chamber grew silent, the only sound the distant drip of water from the cavern's ceiling. Aella and Kael stood, panting and bruised, but alive. They had won this battle. The Titan's whispers grew faint once more, leaving Aella with a newfound sense of purpose. The fate of the world was in her hands, and she would not rest until the shadow had been vanquished for good. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but she knew that she was not alone. "You must seal the rift," the oracle's voice echoed through Aella's mind. "The Titan's prison must be restored, lest their power be used for evil once more." With the Shadow Lord defeated, the chamber grew still, the echoes of battle fading into the eternal silence of the ruins. Aella looked around, her eyes searching the fading forms of the Titans. They nodded in unison, their expressions a mix of pride and solemnity. Their whispers grew clearer, more insistent. "The prison must be sealed," they echoed. "The cycle of darkness must not begin anew." Aella felt a sudden burden lift from her, replaced by a newfound urgency. The power she had claimed was not for personal glory, but for the protection of the world she had only just begun to understand. She turned to Kael, whose face was etched with exhaustion and relief. "We must find the key," he said, his voice low and determined. "The one artifact that can seal the rift and prevent his return." Their journey took them through the bowels of the earth, following the whispers of the Titans. The path grew steeper, the air thinner, until they reached the very bottom of the world, where the Titanomachy had once been waged. Here, in the Chamber of the Fallen, lay the shackles that had once bound the Titans. They were massive, each link the size of a man, forged in the fires of the earth and imbued with the power of the gods themselves. At their center was a lock, ancient and complex, that only the key could open. Aella reached out tentatively, her hand trembling as it hovered over the lock. The Titan's whispers grew to a crescendo, guiding her hand as she inserted the key. It turned with a sound that resonated through the cavern, sending a shockwave that rippled through the very fabric of existence. The shackles began to glow with an intense light, the metal warping and melting into the stone floor. The Titan's power was being contained once more, their whispers fading into the quietude of their eternal slumber. As the light dimmed, Aella turned to Kael, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kael sheathed his sword, his gaze meeting hers with a solemn nod. "Now, we return to the world above and ensure that the shadow never grows long enough to threaten it again." Their journey back to the surface was fraught with danger. The shadows that had retreated in the wake of the Shadow Lord's defeat began to coalesce, seeking to hinder their progress. But Aella was not the same girl who had once feared the ruins. She was the Titan's heir, her every step now carrying the weight of destiny. Emerging into the light of a new day, they found the world had changed. The once threatening skies were clear, the air fresh with the scent of new beginnings. The villagers had gathered outside the ruins, their faces a mix of awe and relief. The oracle awaited them, her eyes filled with a warmth that had not been there before. "You have done well, Aella," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "But remember, your destiny is not yet fulfilled. The whispers of the Titans are still with you, and the world will continue to need your protection. Aella looked at the sword in her hand, the blade still warm from battle. She knew that her journey was far from over, that she would face more trials and tribulations. But with Kael at her side and the power of the Titans within her, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they set forth, leaving the safety of the village behind. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Aella's fate was now inextricably linked to the world she had been born to protect. And she would not rest until the whispers of the Titans were nothing more than a faint memory, a reminder of the power that had once been and the peace that she had restored. The world they encountered was not as they had left it. The very land itself seemed to have awakened, the flora and fauna responding to the shift in the balance of power. They encountered creatures that had once been myths, now freed from the Shadow Lord's influence, and people whose lives had been irrevocably changed by the recent events. As Aella and Kael ventured forth from the village, they found the world transformed. The once threatening skies were clear, the air fresh with the scent of new beginnings. The villagers, once filled with fear, now walked with a newfound hope. Yet, the darkness was not entirely vanquished. Whispers of its return echoed through the land, a constant reminder of the battle yet to come. Aella, now known as the Titan's heir, felt a growing sense of responsibility. She knew that her journey was far from over. Their path led them through ancient forests, across treacherous mountains, and through bustling cities. Along the way, they encountered strange creatures and met people with extraordinary tales. They learned of hidden knowledge, ancient prophecies, and the remnants of lost civilizations. One such encounter brought them to an ancient library, hidden deep within a towering mountain. There, they discovered a scroll that spoke of the Titans' true origins and the secrets of their power. It revealed that the Titans were not merely beings of immense strength, but also guardians of balance. They had been imprisoned not for their evil, but for their inability to prevent the world from falling into chaos. Armed with this new knowledge, Aella and Kael continued their quest. They sought out the remaining Titans, scattered across the land, hoping to awaken their slumbering power. Each Titan held a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the ancient wisdom needed to restore balance to the world. They faced monstrous creatures, treacherous terrain, and the constant threat of the returning darkness. But with each victory, Aella's power grew stronger, her connection to the Titans deepening. Finally, they reached the heart of the ancient world, a place of immense power and mystery. Here, they confronted the remnants of the Shadow Lord, a twisted and corrupted version of his former self. The battle was fierce, the stakes higher than ever before. Aella and Kael fought with all their might, their swords flashing in the dim light. The Titan spirits rallied around them, their power surging through Aella's veins. With a final, decisive blow, she struck down the remnants of the Shadow Lord, banishing the darkness forever. As the light of dawn broke through the ancient chamber, Aella and Kael stood victorious. The world was saved, the balance restored. The Titan's whispers faded, leaving behind a sense of peace and tranquility. Aella and Kael returned to their village, heroes hailed by all. But they knew that the world was a fragile place, and there would always be new challenges to face. And so, they continued their adventures, guardians of the world, protectors of the balance. Their story became a legend, a tale of courage, hope, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories. Give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.